Hi viewers, another episode of Guest with Nazir. We're honored today. We have a special guest who is a retired judge, His Honor Michael Murphy, QC. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for inviting me.
Michael, please tell our viewers about your early days and your childhood.
Well, believe it or not, from my name, I'm actually Welsh. I have a very Irish name, but I was born and brought up in the valleys of South Wales, Aberdare in mid Glamorganshire, and I lived there for the first 18 years of my life. My parents were immigrants, Irish mother and father, but who settled in Wales because of the coal industry in South Wales. I went to a grammar school in Wales. In those days we had a thing called the 11 plus, which was a refined method of torture for 11-year-olds. And then I went to, as I say, the grammar school, and then had to make a decision as to which university I went to. And to this day, I don't really know why. I think they sent me a very, very nice prospectus. I knew nothing about Sheffield. I didn't know where it was. I didn't know what happened here. But I applied to Sheffield. It was my first choice. I wanted to get out of Wales. And in 1968, 50 years ago now, I came to Sheffield, and you can't get rid of me. I seem to be staying here all the time now. All my children are born here, and my wife's from Sheffield.
So it means glamour of our university brought you here?
Yes, it was. I loved the university and I loved the city. As soon as I got here, I loved the city.
At what age you decided you want to join legal profession?
Not even when I decided I wanted to do law had I decided I wanted to join the legal profession. I didn't know what else to do at university. I was studying languages and history and English, and I couldn't see myself really doing those at university. So someone suggested law, and it was as much of a lottery as that. And so off I came to Sheffield to do law. In my first year, I didn't know what I wanted to do in the law, whether I wanted to go into the law. I thought of the probation service, the police, the prison service, and I don't know why, but at the end of the year, I thought, well, how about being a barrister? And I really drifted on from there, I think, and did 3 years of law at Sheffield, and then stayed on and did an MA in criminology at Sheffield, and then went to London to read for the bar.
So when you were a student, who was your ideal? Because sometimes you have ideals, you visualize in your life that who is your ideal. So
that's a difficult one. I mean, in terms of legal people, the professors at the University of Sheffield they were men of great skill, integrity. I really looked up to them. In my first year at Sheffield, I never thought I'd actually be able to complete a law degree. It all seemed so complicated. You know, just like in your first year when it's all very strange and different. So I suppose at that time it was the professors at the university and the people I met at university too. It was a really formative experience for me being here. Probably that's why I'm still here 50 years on. I liked it so much, and I adapted so well to Sheffield.
So after completing your master's in criminology, so what was the next stage?
The next stage is bar finals. In those days, you had to do it in London. And I went to London for a year. We had to eat dinners, as it was called, keep terms. The bar, certainly in 1973, was still very old-fashioned. And eating dinners means you had to literally eat dinners with other people who were going to be barristers at the same time. It was a very good idea maybe 100 years before, when there were only 6 or 7 people a year that became barristers. But by my time there were a couple of hundred, I suppose, maybe 100 who were going to the bar. And so we got to meet one another in a college atmosphere in London. And we also had to do exams, I'm afraid, and a course. So that was a year's course, and I came back to Sheffield in 1973, and that's when I started as a pupil barrister in Sheffield.
So how many dinners you have to attend?
Yes, look at the size of me. I think it was 12 in those days, but you couldn't just eat 12 one after another. You kept it in terms. So it would be over the course of just over a year it would take to eat your dinners. And so I was coming back from Sheffield when I was a pupil barrister back to London for 3 nights to eat dinners. It sounds a bit bizarre. Well, a lot of the bar sounds a bit unusual, but that's what you had to do.
So what is the philosophy of these dinners? So you attend any special speeches of the lecturers or any QCs or any retired judges? So what is the philosophy?
That would be sensible. The bar is divided into 4 inns of court, and you have to belong to one of these inns of court. There's the Inner Temple, which I was a member of, the Middle Temple, Gray's Inn, and Lincoln's Inn. And each of those used to be a sort of a college, and indeed to some extent is still, I think. And so the idea of the dinner was you'd go dine out with people who were going to be your contemporaries at the bar, who you'd meet. When the bar was much smaller, the chances are you'd not just meet them, but you'd be against them. And so the idea was, as I say, a sort of a collegiate atmosphere. Quite good, but perhaps by the time I was there, had outserved its usefulness. But interesting. Very interesting from someone, as I say, from South Wales, who was completely overawed by the majesty of these buildings. Have you ever been to the temple in London?
No, I'm aiming to go.
You must go, honestly. It's just off Fleet Street and the Strand, where the courts of justice are. Just go across the road, and you step back 100 years. At least you step back to Dickensian times. The libraries were beautiful. The offices there are wonderful. I enjoyed my time in London, but I wanted to get back here, really.
So it means I think visit is okay, but Sheffield is always on number one for you.
Absolutely. My favourite part of London, I'll probably get stoned for saying this, is St Pancras on the way out. I loved getting into the train and heading back for Sheffield. But I say London was fun, but it was never for me. It was always just too big of a place and too much of a rush. No, I prefer Sheffield.
So after dinners and qualifications, so you moved back to Sheffield?
I came back to Sheffield, and then we do a thing called Pupilage, which is really, as it sounds, it's like an apprenticeship. And it's a 1-year apprenticeship. And I was fortunate enough to become a pupil to Peter Baker, who was quite a famous barrister at that time. He became a QC in the middle of my pupilage, and so he could no longer keep me as a pupil. Once you become a QC, you don't have pupils. And then I was even more fortunate in the middle of this pupilage to transfer to a man who subsequently became a judge, Michael Walker, who became His Honour Judge Michael Walker, the Recorder of Sheffield. So I did very well. And again, it seems to have been as much luck as judgment. I don't know whether you found this in your life, but things just happen and you see a purpose in them later. And it was completely fortuitous that I had such a good pupilage in Sheffield. And then I stayed on and became a tenant. And even that wasn't guaranteed. That wasn't necessarily going to happen. But it was just fortunate. There were 3 pupils at the time, and they said they had 1 place. And I'd like to tell you I was the best and made it, but that's not what happened, really. The other 2 pulled out. And so I was left as the only pupil that year. And bless them.
It's like a lottery situation?
It was. It was. The others pulled out for different reasons altogether. One of them, who was a very able lawyer, just did not take to advocacy. He became physically ill before going into court, got so nervous and so tongue-tied that he didn't do it. And the other one went to become a vicar, which was a surprise to everyone. And so there I was, last man standing, as it were, and I became a tenant at what was then 42 Bank Street in Sheffield. It was the only set of chambers in Sheffield in those days.
Is this same chamber which is Bank House now, or is it different?
Sort of. 42 Bank Street split, and after I was there 3 years, and some of us went to Campo Lane, and the rest stayed at Bank House. And then the Campo Lane people went down to Paradise Square because we got too big, and the Bank Street people went up to Bank House, which is in Hartshead, because they got too big as well. So the bar was expanding in those days, very, very much so. There were, I think, when we started in Campo Lane, there were only 8 of us. And when I left the bar, I think there were 38 of us. And now my old chambers have been taken over by chambers from Manchester, Liverpool, and whatever. They're a huge conglomerate now. There's 250 altogether. So the bar's changed considerably.
Any experience you have during your practice that you have visited any foreign courts?
Not foreign in the sense of away from England, because the qualification I have is not portable. I couldn't take it elsewhere, I don't think. And so I never went anywhere. I was on holiday once and went to America and visited an American court, which was eye-opening and made me yearn to get back to Sheffield Crown Court. But no, I've never been to a foreign court. I'd like to, and I think that would be a very useful adjunct to teaching young people about law, to spend a couple of weeks or so. Maybe these days, I know the University of Sheffield these days, if you do law at Sheffield, they have a program where they send you to another country. And it's your choice, I think, as to which country that is. Most of them go for an English-speaking country, for obvious reasons, if you're going to do law. But and they go to university there. They're not necessarily to a court. But I think that's a very good way of doing it, if you can. Spend a year abroad and see what's going on.
So how many years you practice as a lawyer?
Let's see, 26 years, I think, practice as a lawyer. The last 7 years was as a QC at Queen's Counsel. 19 years as what they call a junior. A junior is anyone who is not a QC. You could be a junior aged 92 and a QC aged 40. It's just, again,
for our viewers' interest, please tell Mike, what is the difference between a barrister and a QC, and how this journey is completed by a barrister to become a QC?
Yes. A QC is still a barrister. A QC still practices at the bar, but it's the QC is the person who is in the first rank of the bar, they say. And to be a QC can be a real risk, because as a junior barrister, that's someone who's not a QC, as I said, no matter how experienced they are. As a junior barrister, you're in a set of chambers, you're pretty much guaranteed to get most of the work, particularly in common law, which is crime and civil work and family work. That's the sort of work I was always in. You're pretty much guaranteed to get a living out of it if you're a member of chambers. As a QC, it's more of a lottery, because most cases do not require a QC. It's only the most difficult, the most important cases, the bigger cases that will have a QC. And obviously, the client, whoever that is, has to pay more when they have a QC. And so they won't bother with a QC if they could make do with a perfectly adequate junior. And most members of the junior bar, of any sort of age at all, are very, very competent at what they do. So you don't need a QC in every case by any means. Now, in my case, I'd been practicing as a barrister for 19 years, and it seemed the way forward at that time, the sort of work that I wanted to get into. I was involved with crime, mostly at that time, criminal work, were murders and the really serious crimes and that sort of thing. So you had to become a QC to do that sort of work. I applied. In those days, it was a mystical system. I couldn't tell you how I got the appointment in the end. The first year I applied, I did not get the appointment. I was refused. So I applied a second time, and that year I was successful and became a QC. As I say, in those days they didn't ask for referees, but there was a sort of an old boys club where they'd go around and ask judges and senior barristers, other QCs, people who one had appeared before, and they'd take what they call soundings. And there were people in London who did nothing else, I think.
So how old at that time you were when you achieved this?
Let's see, I was 42, 43, I think, when I became a QC.
And recently we have in Sheffield, after a long time, Barrister Gulnawaz Hussain,
yes.
QC.
Yes, Naz, I call him Naz. I say Sheffield has done very, very well to get Naz as a QC. He's a very, very able advocate. I didn't know him when he first started at the bar. I was a judge by that time. But I've seen him in front of me as a barrister. He's very impressive, very, very good man. And as I say, he will do very well, I hope. I'm sure he will.
He's very intelligent and
super intelligent.
And his experience
yes.
and his weight and his intelligent, no doubt.
Yeah. When he gets the confidence, he will be wonderful. And that will come within the next 12 months. Because I think he's still a bit nervous about what he sees as his new appointment as a QC. But he'll do it very well. We've told him, judges have told him, when I was a judge, I called him in and spoke to him and said, isn't it about time you applied to become a QC? It's a difficult and different procedure these days. Now, Naz, or Gul, as you call him Gul, do you?
We call him Gul.
Sorry, Naz is his nickname, I think, at the bar. He would have had to apply for the become a QC, fill in forms, go for interviews, and get referees. It's a much more transparent way of becoming appointed to Silk, as they call it, but it's more difficult. And I don't know how many times he's tried. I think this might be his first go, and he's got it first time. But it's even more difficult in Silk these days, because the CPS, for example, the Crown Prosecuting Solicitors, tend to do the murder work themselves or give it to juniors.
We will continue this episode. Viewers, this was Guest with Nazir. We will continue this episode. Our honorable guest will continue his appearance. Keep watching Sheffield Live.